Yeah, I mean, for years I've had a lot of things that were on my list of I'm going to do that after I get my license. So now I have my license, and I have to actually get started on that list.
Yeah.
And it turns out that it takes a little bit more work than that.
You know, I think a lot of us have the things where it's like, well, when this happens, then I'll do this. And then you get to that, and then you're going, okay, but now I just need to do this other thing, and then I'll do that. Like that's a pretty consistent theme, I feel like.
Yeah, so I'm juggling that one right now. It turns out that the nice job proposal that I created to convince my employers to keep me on with a better salary was actually an awful lot of work that I offered to do. So then trying to squeeze in my other things that I want to do around that is a bit of a challenge.
Yes. Yeah, those darn pay raises that come with more stuff to do. I'm telling you.
Yeah, so that's what I get for trying to convince them that I'm worth money.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, so Philip says, I hit a random mood swing, not enjoying it. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Philip. That sucks. Bite Marks is watching the fluff butt wind up to jump on your shoulder is so much fun. Better than getting more work with no raise. Hey, you know what? That is the truth.
Definitely true.
That is.
I was a little bit worried that was going to happen, so I already had a list of where else I was going to apply if things didn't work out. But I'm quite happy that I didn't have to go to that.
Yeah.
As it said in the bio, I like where I'm working. I'm glad I was able to stay.
There you go. Okay, so as you guys know, we do have a Q set up. So if you type exclamation point Q and then a space, just the letter Q, not like Q with all the letters after it. Space, and then just type in your question. That'll put your question into a queue. I'll clear them out one by one as we get to them. And yeah, I think that's about all I got. So we should be good. If you'll have any questions, if you're not able to get them into the queue, just ask them in chat. I am watching chat as well, so we can get there that way too. Just depends. Okay, so first off, you said that you had a few things that really influenced your kind of early life and the trajectory of your life as well. So how did you discover D&D when you were 8, and had you been gaming in any capacity before that?
So, I mean, gaming to the extent that all young kids play games and, you know, whatever board games were available at that time. There was actually, I guess, the prequel to my introduction to D&D. When I was probably 5, my cousins, who at that time I think were maybe 14 and 16, give or take, they were into D&D back then. So they decided to just kind of mess around with it a little bit, teach my brother and me the basics, no real rules or anything, just kind of a free form. Here's a situation. What do you do? And right. Just playing around with that. But other than that one moment, what happened when I was 8 was the new kid in class. I made friends with him. He had learned D&D from, I guess, neighbors or somebody where he used to live. So then when we started hanging out, he offered to teach me this game that seemed interesting. And that pretty much captured my life from there.
I like captured your life. I think that's great.
And I feel like I could probably have thought of a better way, but whatever, it works.
No. Capture your life. Like, I feel like that is a legitimate thing with D&D. Like, you start playing it and you either love it or hate it. I mean...
Yeah, I mean, he was out of it within a couple years after that. I have involuntary breaks because, grown-up life and scheduling, but I'm still playing online when I can.
Yeah, absolutely. So our first question of the night is, what piqued your interest in D&D?
I have no idea. I mean, this is almost 30 years now that I'm trying to remember. It seemed cool. I honestly can't remember what about it struck me the way it did. I mean, to some extent, it grew over time. It wasn't an immediate obsession. Although I know the first time I walked into the local game store after my friend's mom told my mom where it was, that was a big moment for me.
Yeah.
But it was a tiny, cramped place back then. And since they've then they've moved into a much larger location.
Nice.
I still have fond memories of their tiny storefront, about the size of the basement I'm sitting in right now.
Yeah. The first gaming store. So I didn't get into D&D, but the first kind of game that I got into that was an actual game besides board games. I mean, like, I've been playing board games for forever, but besides board games, something that you could go and get new stuff for and continue playing and like change the game as you go, kind of, was Magic the Gathering.
Ah, yes.
And so the first time I went to a game store was actually, I was in high school. And I had, you know, a deck of cards. And by the time I walked out of that store, which was really tiny, it was like, I remember it being smaller than a Starbucks, like super tiny and just lined, super cramped, almost like a bookstore. But I walked out with a shoebox full of cards.
Nice.
From there. And they were all used. Like, all of them weren't just, some of them were even like almost torn up. But I had a lot of fun. With that.
That's a good way to start.
Yeah, but you know, I don't remember the first time I played Magic the Gathering, but I do remember the first time I went to a comic store. So that's an interesting distinction to make. Can't wait to get settled enough to get a game going here. Yeah, so Bite Mark just moved, and she's a big.
Congratulations on the new place.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so our next question is: do you prefer hex or square grid?
Ideally, I prefer theater of the mind, but I know that sometimes that's hard to manage, especially in my fourth ed days. I don't have a strong preference. I mean, I'm used to thinking of square grid for actually doing minis during combat. Hex, I always associate with the old, area maps. So to this day, if I see hexes, I know there are some games that use hexes for their tactical combat. I'm just thinking of terrain, and specifically I'm thinking of the icons from the old rule cyclopedia that I grew up with.
There you go.
Yep.
So one of the other things that you mentioned having a big impact on your life trajectory was Weird Al. So what about Weird Al has had such an impact on you, and are you still a fan of what he is continuing to put out now?
Still a fan, yes. Sometimes I don't like the music as much, but that's not his fault. It's the music that he's given to work with. And I'm going to be an old man for a moment and just say that the music he's getting is mostly crap.
Music used to be better.
Garbage, because there used to be a band called Garbage and I liked them.
Oh, well, true. There you go.
Yeah. But yeah, back then, so honestly, it was Weird Al and Offspring at the same time that
I love Offspring.
I was at camp. Somebody happened to be playing both of those CDs back to back, and like that was the moment that I got really into music. Was from Off the Deep End and Smash. So dating myself for those who care. So I got real into music after that for a long time, and even though I don't focus on it as much as I used to, music is still kind of a big thing for me. The reason I focus on Weird Al in my bio is mainly I'm desperate for nerd cred. But besides that, I mean, Weird Al is a genius. I've seen him in concert a couple of times. It was actually the first rock concert that I ever went to was the Bad Hair tour. And it was amazing. Yep. I haven't seen him in a few years. It was funny. I remember that first time when I was there, my parents took me to that. And then I saw him again probably about 5 years ago, and a couple rows in front of me, I saw, dad with a couple of younger kids. And I was just thinking, that was right after my daughter was born. So I'm thinking like a couple more years, she'll be old enough. I will take her to a Weird Al concert.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome.
Just need to make sure that she appreciates him.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So our next question is back to D&D. Do you enjoy playing by the traditional rules of D&D or freestyle where the rules are agreed upon by the players and the chosen DM?
Whatever system we're playing, I like to have a system and generally be following it.
I think that's fair.
House rules are fine. Judgment calls for a specific situation that might break from the normal rules. That's fine. I mean, I'm not so much into D&D these days. I feel like I've done as much as I want to with it, and there's a zillion other RPGs, so I don't know. I don't like sounding like a hipster. I'm too cool for D&D. I like the games that you maybe haven't heard of.
Yeah.
But which isn't true. The games I like are still, and they're not mainstream, but it's not like I'm into the really obscure stuff.
You can be into the really obscure stuff. That's fine too. It doesn't matter.
I just don't know all the really obscure stuff, or I just don't realize it's obscure. I wrote a game. I guess that's pretty obscure.
Well, see, there you go. But you're taking everything that you love and putting it into that game. So what is that game that you've written?
It's called Archon Majeur. It's not so much its own game as a setting for Fate Accelerated Edition. It is available on drive-thru for name your price. Basically, for years, I had this idea that I wanted to find a way to use tarot cards in RPGs because I love the imagery of tarot cards. I think that it's really evocative. And so I came up with this idea after reading up a little bit on the history of tarot and how it came out of Italy and France a few hundred years ago. And so I basically came up with this idea for a vague setting that's sort of kind of like Renaissance era Italy and France. But rather than strictly defining the setting, I just have it being a number of independent city-states, which are defined by drawing tarot cards to answer a list of questions about them. So it's a randomly generated setting. There's another thing I love is randomly generated anything. So I came up with this game where you randomly generate the setting, and the questions are such that it inherently creates conflict, and then the PCs come in and decide how they want to screw around with it. So I've played it a couple of times in the testing, and it was pretty fun. Got things that I don't think any of us expected coming to the table, but that's exactly what I want out of the game.
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so tell me the name again of the game that you created.
Archon Majeur. In my attempt at French. I'll text it to you right now over the Discord thingy.
Because we can pull up a link to that as well and put it in the chat, and then I'll put it in the video description too, so that people have access to it. And if they want to check it out, they are welcome. Oh wow, I spelled it totally differently, so I'm glad that you sent it to me. There.
You probably also got it wrong compared to actual French, but whatever.
I will never know that ever.
Once I hit publish it on the PDF, I'm not going back and making changes.
I hear you, totally. Okay, so our next question is: how do you feel about purely story-driven games like 10 Candles?
I feel like I heard something about 10 Candles, and I'm having trouble remembering it now. They're not really my style. I like rolling dice. If I was playing a totally diceless game, I would miss that.
Let's see. 10 Candles is a zero prep tabletop storytelling game designed for one-shot 2 to 4 hour sessions of tragic horror. Interesting.
So I'm on board with that part.
Huh. There's some dice and 10 Candles. Okay.
I suppose I'll have to give it a try sometime.
Yeah. I have never even heard of it, so that's interesting.
I feel like they might have mentioned it one time on System Mastery, but I've forgotten.
Entirely possible. All right, well, there you go. Okay, so this next one's going to sound really weird and totally unrelated, but we've been asking guests this after one of our guests was a mental health professional and absolutely loved true crime and even said she had a favorite serial killer. So this is more just curiosity on my part.
No problem.
Do you have a favorite serial killer?
I don't have a favorite. I do like learning about serial killers. Maybe a little bit less so these days than a few years ago. I was more into that. But since you had warned me ahead of time that this question might come up, I was thinking about it. And one that did occur to me, I recently listened to the last podcast on the left episode about Carl Panzram, who I thought was really interesting. And especially from the perspective of psychology and trauma. And his story is basically the most horrific possible example of what goes wrong when the people around you don't pay attention to trauma, don't care about trauma, don't do anything to help with trauma. You know, they're very much stuck in this mindset of punish him until he's good, which doesn't always work. Big surprise. So that's not one for viewers with a weak stomach, but it's he was an interesting one.
Yeah.
So that'll be my choice. My wife said I wasn't allowed to go with any of the cliche answers like Manson or Bundy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Although somebody asked me once who I thought was the sexiest serial killer, so I had to say Bundy for that one.
Huh. I'm not even sure I know what most serial killers look like, that everyone's, like the really, I guess, popular serial killers. Yeah. I guess I'm not even really sure what they look like, so that's interesting. So are you a fan of true crime in general? Like, just, you said you were interested in serial killers.
I'm interested in it. It's not the main thing that I go for, but I won't say no to it if it's around.
Yeah.
I do have one true crime podcast in my rotation, which is last podcast that I mentioned a little bit ago. I think their cult episodes are actually probably my favorites.
Nice.
Okay. The true crime ones.
All right. I like it. All right. So getting back kind of to the mental health part of everything. Why do you do? Yeah, right. We like to open up with the kind of get to know you stuff, but so what interests you about mental health, and who or what inspired you to get into this field? Kind of why do you do what you do?
So the moment that got me interested in psychology, this is the bit I mentioned at age 10. So the story is, we had a snow day from school. So it was me and my little brother, and my dad was home watching us. And we actually had enough snow for this. He decided that it would be a fun game if we, took the sled outside and took the dog and just took turns where, my brother or I would hold the dogs. It was a Dalmatian, so compared to us at that time, she was pretty big, pretty strong. My dad would run around, the dog would chase him, and we'd be pulled on the sled, and it was great fun.
All right.
But at one point, the dog got her own ideas and decided to start chasing after my brother instead of me. And I'm thinking, like, move out of the way, come on. And he's just standing there frozen in terror as this dog comes charging at him. And I just kept thinking, like, why doesn't he just move? It seems obvious. And for reasons that I cannot recall, first of all, I don't even know how I knew what psychology was back then. But somehow this got into, this psychology thing sounds kind of interesting. And, so that idea bounced around for a while, mostly as a joke, until high school when I actually had a psychology class I could take. And despite some scary moments at the beginning where, the teacher gave us printouts of articles by Freud and Skinner, I think, was the other one, and just reading their 100-something-year-old psychology journal articles and thinking, oh my God, is this what I said I was interested in? Right. But once I got past that, it was pretty cool. Not Skinner, he was less than 100 years ago. Somebody out there in the audience is yelling at me right now, and I can't hear them, and I'm just going to let it go with that. But so once I actually got to start studying it for real, and the first sign that I had picked the right field was that almost everything I encountered was interesting in one way or another. Less so the physical brain stuff. There's people who are into that. I'm glad there are. I'm not one of them. I know the basics. I care about the frontal lobe. I care less about the amygdala, but I really should, because that's the one that messes everything up for you, in addition to having a bunch of positive functions. But, all those other classes, like theory of motivation, abnormal psych, of course, social psych, all that other stuff. I liked everything in undergrad. I think I started out wanting to go clinical because it didn't occur to me at the start that there were other options, but clinical stayed interesting once I was actually learning what I was talking about. And having gotten into it, So this may or may not be the truth from back then, but retroactively, the truth is, that opportunity to take somebody who has had really unfortunate things happen in their lives, probably outside of their control, is how it usually goes, and be able to help them turn that around and still have a life that's good for them and good for the people around them. I just really love being able to do that.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. I mean, it's nice to get into a career just to kind of get into the career, but it's really nice to get into a career and then find out that, wow, I really do love this. I think that that's fantastic.
I would not have survived grad school if I didn't.
Yeah. Well,
which I think they do intentionally.
Probably.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because who wants a therapist who doesn't like what they're doing?
Yeah. Every once in a while, you get angry clients or family members who accuse you of just being there for the paycheck, and I'm just like, have you seen my paycheck?
Right. Yeah. I would not be doing this if that's what this is about.
Yeah.
Bymark said maybe Jung, who collaborated with Freud.
Oh, for that other article?
Yeah.
No, it was one of the early American behaviorists, like pre-Skinner. My history of psych professor is rolling in his grave right now.
That's totally fine. So Philip McCracken has a question. What made you specifically choose to do psychology with younger people?
That, I think, traces back to high school. The crowd that I was hanging out with, they were the ones that were a little bit more open about, like, oh yeah, my parents send me to therapy for this reason or that reason. And since I already knew I had some interest in becoming a therapist one day, I would ask them about it because I was curious to know what the process was actually like.
Yeah.
And them being teenagers, a lot of what I got was, oh, my therapist is such an idiot. He doesn't get me at all. I could say this and he would say that. And so me, with my infinite teenage wisdom, I started thinking, okay, so I'm going to make sure I always remember what it's like to be a teenager. And I'm going to be the therapist who gets teenagers, and I'm going to be awesome, and I'm going to be the one that can reach them. And I don't know, I had some ideas like that because, teenager, which I kick myself a little bit every time I make fun of myself being a teenager. But as much as teenage me hates to admit it, adults occasionally do understand things and, get things right once in a while. Yeah. My parents, if you're watching this video on YouTube, I didn't say that part.
Yeah, absolutely. Bymark said, to be fair, teenagers don't even get teenagers. So that is true.
That is true.
That is super true. So what gave you the idea to start developing an RPG social skills group specifically?
Over the last couple of years, there have been a number, even before that, really, once in a while, I would have a kid I was working with where, for one reason or another, in the back of my mind, I would just be thinking, like, this kid would probably love RPGs if somebody introduced them to it.
Yeah.
Which, I couldn't really just do in the middle of a therapy session. I'm not at the point yet where I can get away with playing role-playing games with somebody in a session and then bill it to their insurance. But, there were some kids where it was just like, I bet this is a thing they would like. And then there were others sometimes where I had specific ideas about, this or that aspect of role playing. I bet like they would really learn this from it, that this kid needs to learn. And the one that stands out in my mind the most was a kid who, I don't even remember what his official diagnosis was. I felt like he didn't really have anything going on that needed to be a disorder, but he had just some difficulty being able to relate to other people in a way that other people could grasp. Like, he was the weird kid, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was just some of his mannerisms, the way he talked. I didn't, I have a high tolerance for the weird kid, so he and I got along pretty well. And he was that first one where I really thought, like, well, for one thing, I wish there was any social skills group at all that would take him, but all the social skills groups that I've been able to find in this area are specifically for autism spectrum. That's great. They need that help also.
Right.
But it would be nice if there was a social skills group for people who needed the help but didn't have the specific diagnosis to go with it. So those thoughts combined, and that one quickly jumped to the front of my list of when I finally get my license, this is what I'm going to do. So, I did that. Once I got my license and they gave me the new position, one of the first things that I started doing in my free time, because I didn't think I could justify my on-the-clock time, was I started doing my lit search and writing up a proposal and, really getting everything together. And that turned into a grant application, which I finally found out last week was denied.
Oh.
But, small grant, it's not the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But just from, because the CEO of the company had to approve my application before I could send it out, she already told me I had the green light to go ahead whether I get the grant or not.
That's awesome.
So that's pretty good. So I actually have a thing going on, and now I'm at that scary part where it's like, oh yeah, this thing I was fantasizing about, I've got to actually put effort into it now.
Right. Yeah, it just got real.
Yeah. Last week, I just got the measures that I'm going to be using to test the effectiveness of the treatment. Now I have to polish up the manual because it's 2 pages of I already know the rules of the game, but session 1 we're going to focus on this, and the next few sessions I want to make sure we've got this going on. So I got to polish that up for readers who don't already know the game, but without without just giving them a rule book.
Yeah. And is this something that, you said session 1, you want to make sure you cover this, session 2, you want to make sure you cover this. Is this something that you would kind of really dial in to each individual, or is this something that is pretty static?
Part of the plan for session 1 is go through with all the group members of, what do you want to get out of doing this group? We're here to work on social skills. What does that mean to you? What do you want to get better at? Or if you already think you're perfect, what do your stupid parents and your stupid case manager think you need to get better at?
Yeah. I like that. That's great.
Yeah. And I've got my list of suggestions for when I just get a room of bored, empty faces looking back at me. Because, I've done therapy with teenagers before.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sometimes you do just get kind of a blank face. I've got a 17-year-old, an almost 13-year-old, a 12-year-old, and then, the 5-year-old doesn't count, but you get a lot of, we're at the stage with the older 3 that it's like, how was your day? I don't know. Well, did you do anything? I don't know. Did you go to school? Come on, give me something. Give me something.
Mine's only 6, and she's already practicing that.
Oh, yeah. So our youngest just starting kindergarten, and I asked him today, I said, well, what'd you do in school today? I don't know, we played. I'm like, okay, well, he's in kindergarten, so maybe all they did was play. But then I started talking to him more, and he started telling me, well, they're learning about, he called them properties, but it's really textures. This is smooth, and this is rough, and this is, so they're learning some things about the properties of objects and those kinds of things. And I'm like, okay, so you didn't just play. But yeah, there's definitely, I could definitely see you getting some blank stares when you say, what do you want to get out of this?
Yeah, so I'm hoping that maybe starting with some pre-gen character sheets and dice on the table will get them at least a little curious. I think the cover art on the dungeon book should grab some attention, so that's obviously going to be sitting out in plain view.
Yeah.
So it should at least start out looking different from all the other therapy groups they've been dragged to.
Yep.
And obviously I'm making some assumptions here. I don't know, maybe I'm going to get some bright enthusiastic kids.
I'll bet you'll get at least some, but I'm sure there'll be some of the opposite, the blank folks too. So.
But hopefully, we do 1 or 2 practice fights and they get into the swing of things.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, it's fighting. Come on.
Yeah.
But Mark said, I have something for this. Instead of asking what happened today, I asked my kid what was the best thing that happened today. And worst also, that used to work with my kids. I used to do that too.
I get that sometimes. I don't remember, or best thing that happened. It was when I came home and I played Minecraft.
Yes.
No, what was the best thing that happened at school?
Lunch. Playing outside. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Sometimes I try, what was the coolest thing you learned? That might get me an answer, and sometimes it gets me, I don't remember.
Yep. Yeah. The I don't remember kills me. It was today.
Yeah.
Come on. Okay, so we have another question. Do you have a method for determining what subject matter is appropriate for which age and maturity levels?
Are we talking about therapy in general, or are therapy specifically?
I think she's asking about RPG specifically.
I don't remember
as related to RPGs, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember who I stole this from. Probably one of the other RPG therapy people on Twitter. But my plan, because I'm targeting the group for like 9 to 12, roughly that age range. So part of session 1 is going to be setting out the rules for group, and one of the rules that I have written down on the list is, we're going to play this like an action movie. Stick to PG-13. There's going to be fight scenes. Let's do some cool action stuff. We're not doing over-the-top blood and gore.
Yeah.
That age range, I don't know. Sexuality may or may not come up, except maybe in the briefest, most superficial sense. Probably not going to be appropriate for the group.
Right.
And partly because of the age, partly because it's pretty outside the focus of what we're doing, unless this gets into, like, how do I talk to girls? Well, okay, that's something we might explore in the game. I'll cross that bridge when we get there, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, part of the beauty of developing this kind of thing is that you can explore that a little bit and see where those boundaries are. Now, do you envision kind of going through this process with only kids that you are already seeing, or do you envision kind of bringing in kids that other therapists are seeing at the time, or how do you feel like that's going to work?
No, I mean, besides just the fact that my own caseload is pretty small,
yeah,
I would prefer to have kids that I don't work with otherwise, because I want to come in fresh, basically.
Okay.
One of the things I have written into my recruitment email that I'm going to be sending out when the time comes is specifically, don't tell me the child's diagnosis. Here are the inclusion criteria for the group. If you've got anybody that you think is appropriate and they meet these criteria, give me their contact information. Don't tell me their diagnosis, because I don't want that to bias anything that I'm doing with them in the group.
Yeah.
I'm intentionally looking at this to just target social skills across any potential diagnosis right now, because social skills can touch any psychological diagnosis. I am going to collect that information afterward, because I think that's going to be interesting for the analysis, but that's going to be after the group is already over and it doesn't change anything that I'm doing with them.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'll find something cool, like kids who had a depression diagnosis, and their scores on this measure improved by 5 points more than kids who had a primary ADHD diagnosis, or whatever I'm going to find. That would be cool. Or maybe I'll find that it's equally effective across all diagnoses that are represented. That would also be cool.
Yeah, but it would be hard to make that kind of correlation if you know about it ahead of time. Kind of thing. So I like that you're bringing that in at the end of it and not kind of getting at the beginning. I think that's really cool. I was thinking you were going to be doing this with kids that you already see and can help support them, through their whatever it is that they're specifically working through. But it's interesting to hear the opposite, that it's kids that you aren't necessarily working with, that you're going to see how you can help support them as a group, which I think that's fantastic too.
Yep.
Okay,
just a side note that's fun. One of the kids that I do see right now, he told me in our first session that he and his brother sometimes play D&D with their dad.
Mm-hmm.
Just, he brought it up, so I immediately jumped on that, because yay, kids who know D&D. So I've tried a little bit to bring Tell Me About Your Character into therapy as part of an actual intervention. It didn't get as far as I was hoping it would, but we might come back to it.
Yeah.
And he's at the younger end, so that level of introspection, he might just not be there yet.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. Unbiased data gathering is the best. Yes, absolutely. Yep. Hey, Alex, how are you? I'll just cheat off Bytes test. Sorry, I'm late. That's okay. No worries. You're good. You only get 5 points off for being late. It's okay.
We get a lot of regulars here.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Well, you missed the discount code at the beginning where you get all my lectures for free, so now you're going to have to pay tuition.
Yep, absolutely. It's true. Okay, so the next question is, so do you strictly do therapy with younger people, or have you done it with older people and veterans as well?
So my previous job that I had while I was in school, I was just general outpatient. My preference was for kids, but I did see a lot of adults at that time, and some of my favorite clients were adults. Um, I don't think I've ever specifically worked with veterans. I've done intakes with veterans, but I don't think I've had any as my own therapy clients. These days, I work exclusively with children and adolescents. I mean, that's by choice, and that's the nature of the agency I work at. That said, I do more family work now than I used to, so sometimes that does include trying to slip in a little bit of therapy for the parents, even when the kid is the identified patient.
Yep. Dr. Dias, evening all, Dungeons and Dragons therapy. Yes, please, done it. It's awesome. That's fantastic. Good.
Glad you agree.
Yep, absolutely. Okay.
I hope you're on the IRB.
So, what age groups would you love to work with? You mentioned 9 to 12-year-olds, right? So are there any age groups you would hate to work with?
I'm not really into the gerontological end of the spectrum. I did that one day ever in my inpatient practicum. I was on the adolescent unit at the time, but they needed to borrow a couple of the grad students to cover the seniors unit for I don't remember what reason. I came away from that feeling like they were like the teenagers, but with the health problems that come with being an older adult. Granted, this was the inpatient unit. They are not representative of the population as a whole, but it's not a population age-wise that I'm real interested in. Again, there are people who are really into that group. They want to focus on that. I'm glad those people are there. They should definitely do that job.
Yep. So I guess, do you feel like there's kind of a natural drop off for the age of someone who would be even interested in an RPG kind of therapy session?
It's definitely something that I would target for kids more than adults. Somebody, college age, definitely you could do it there. And then, of course, by just the nature of psych research, a lot of the studies that do exist have been done with undergrads because that's who's there. If an adult was to ever come to me saying, I'd like to try this out, I would be all over that. The problem that I've run into trying to incorporate games into doing child and family work is I feel like so many adults have this mindset of imagination is for kids, which is just this painfully stupid idea.
Right.
But it's out there. It's something that I've run into when I've tried doing just family session where we're going to play a game together. And when I used to do mobile work, I liked having cooperative games for that purpose. The main one I used to pull out at that time was Forbidden Island, which is a great game, but it never clicked with adults the way it did with kids. Right. And I think it's for that reason. Once I replaced that with Hanabi in my game set, that seemed like that got a better reception because, it's not fantasy or anything. It's a little bit more abstract and more adult-friendly. Boring adult-friendly.
Boring adult-friendly. There you go.
Yes.
Yeah,
the cool adults are all into the games.
Yeah. Yeah, right. There you go. The boring ones are not. I know whenever I play board games with my kids, it's to win. So there's that.
Well, those are good too. But, different things work better for different occasions.
That is true. Okay, our next question is, I don't know if you would know, but what, to your knowledge, causes random mood swings most commonly?
There's a lot of context that goes around that. Mm-hmm. You've got, it could be something that's more strictly neurological, where going back to that stupid amygdala that I was complaining about earlier, something could just be misfiring and chemicals do what the chemicals do, and suddenly your mood has changed. In other cases, it may be more, that there is something in the environment that is perhaps unconsciously reminding a person of something else in their past, and so that then elicits a certain mood. That's where you get, a lot of the classic symptoms people normally think of with PTSD, is something in the environment reminds a person of trauma, and it can be something very small. It can be something the person doesn't even consciously register, but it's there. And when they encounter it, frontal lobe doesn't care what's going on. Something a whole lot deeper is suddenly kicking in and saying, hey, it's time to fight or die.
Right. Yeah, I'm reading an interesting book right now, not necessarily related to therapy at all, but it's related to bias and unconscious bias. And so this one, I would have to look back at the part of the book to find the study that it was referencing, but it was talking about our brain's tendency to group things without even thinking about it. So in this case, it was talking about the racial tendencies. So you tend to group, if you are a white person and you're looking at a white face, you're going to actually look at it and see, because it's like yours already. So you're looking to see how it's different from yours. If you're a white person, you're looking at a black person, like you're just going to group them into, well, that's a black person, it's completely different from me.
Right.
And kind of how to combat that in this case, specifically in a police environment. But it was talking about that your brain does this so automatically that you just there's not even a conscious, it's just immediate, just so immediate. So seeing
Right, you have to really be aware that it is a thing that happens and then do anything about it.
Yeah, so that little piece of something tiny in your environment, you don't even have to consciously register it. Like, it could just be there and your brain's like, oh, look, it's there. I don't even have to think about it. It's there. I know it's there. I'm going to react.
Yep. And that works with all kinds of things. I mean, our brains are amazing, but they're also, well, depending on how you want to frame it, you could say they're amazingly lazy or efficient. Either way, they take a whole lot of shortcuts. Most of the time, that's fine. It's saving resources. It makes everything run more smoothly. But then you've also got a lot of things like that where you're taking shortcuts that are going to cause interpersonal problems. You're taking shortcuts that are going to cause you to misinterpret a situation.
Yep.
Yeah. We're not perfect by any means. We just have to work with what we've got in us.
That's right. Bite Mark says, I need a stupid amygdala emote. Oh my gosh, that would be awesome. That would be fantastic. Alex asked, how old were you when you decided to do what you do? So we kind of covered that, but do you want to just reiterate a little bit?
I mean, to get into the nuance, I guess. So 10 was when it first occurred to me that I knew what psychology was and that it was interesting. Let's see, moving forward. I mean, high school and college kind of reaffirmed what I had already been thinking, just with a little bit of actual knowledge behind it. And then grad school, so at this point we're talking mid to late 20s was when I started. Well, mid to late 20s, actually, for a while I was focused on bipolar disorder. I thought that was the thing that I really wanted to get into. And then, let's see, internship, what was I, 30, 31? So that was when I got really into working with maltreated children and thinking okay, this is it. This is the path that I want to follow for the duration of my career. And so far, so good.
Yeah. I mean, it's working out. It's working out for you.
Hopefully it's working out for some of the kids I'm working with, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Our next question is, have you considered gateway imagination games for adults like Dixit? D-I-X-I-T? I've not heard of that. Dixit. Interesting.
I've heard of it. The permanent 12-year-old who resides in doesn't like that name, or doesn't think that's a name I could say out loud with a straight face. I mean, because I don't primarily work with adults anymore, I don't really have much occasion to do games with adults, gateway or otherwise. I'm always trying to look for different gateway games that won't immediately my wife, because I like we can play games together, and she has I don't know what I want to call it, a little more discriminating taste than I do. More restricted interests on the gaming side of things. That said, I got her into Carcassonne, and she quickly started kicking my ass consistently.
As sometimes spouses are wont to do, right?
Yeah. Therapy wise, no, I mean with the games I've really been focused on the kids primarily, or it's something I'd be doing with kids and caregivers together.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Our next question is, what do you feel is the most effective method to persuade someone to get some sort of counseling?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I have obvious professional bias if I'm talking to any potential need for counseling. This isn't something that I've tried to put into practice yet outside of the clinical setting. It is a conversation that I often have to have with kids coming in who obviously don't want to be there. And when it's a 2-hour eval session, I don't blame them for not wanting to be there. What I try to go for, because so many times people are coming at it from the angle of therapy is just for crazy people, I really try to attack that side of it. And, and so there's a couple of approaches. One is, well, yeah, I agree, you're not crazy. You're doing stuff that totally makes sense given what you're going through in your life. But, the stuff you're doing that makes sense to you, it's making it so, you're getting suspended every other week, or, you disrupted from 3 foster homes in 6 months, or, these kinds of things. And I don't know about you, to me, that kind of sucks. So maybe there's something that we could do to just help that be happening a little bit less, even without you having to be crazy first. Sometimes that works, or just the general idea of it's not about whether you're crazy or not, but it's whether or not you think your life is good right now. Let's find a way.
Yeah.
Let's find things that you can do a little bit differently so that everything is going to be better.
Yep.
Maybe not everything, but it's my foot in the door, and then we can get into the details of what therapy will or won't accomplish.
Right.
Yeah. There's nothing that I've found that works 100% consistently, but both of those approaches have sometimes gotten a positive response.
Yeah. I think both of those are fine. I know that if we're talking in the sense of kids, like the parents have a lot of control, and sometimes it's not up to the kid. And that could mean like
openly acknowledge that right at the start.
That could even be on the opposite end, not only on the end of, well, the kid doesn't want to be there, the parent put them there, but also the kid like recognizes the need, but the parent refuses to take them. There's a couple ends of that spectrum that just really suck.
Yeah. When I encounter those kids, it's usually that they already have child protective services involved in the family. They've probably already been removed from the home because that's not the only instance of negligence. But if the parents still have their legal rights, we still have to get their consent before we can really do anything. Right. So that conversation does come up sometimes. And I mean, as it plays out, it's usually not really up to me. It's usually like the case manager that has that conversation, because they're not going to bother bringing the kid into my office if the parents have already refused to sign consent.
Yeah.
Because we can't do anything then.
Right.
Maybe the judge will allow child protection to sign consent instead if they wait around until the next court date. But these things always get messy, and there is no good solution. There's so many times where I wish it was just easy to override parents' bad decisions when the kid is already involved in the system. But they have those protections for a reason, because there's also lots of times where the parents have the right idea and child protective services maybe doesn't. Not all of those workers are perfect, which I doubt is a surprise to anybody.
Yeah.
Especially anyone that's been involved with the system.
Yeah, not all of anyone is perfect, but when there's lack of funding and lack of resources and too many of one thing to do to go around to the resources, like it's very easy to get burned out. Yes, yeah.
And some people stay in the job a lot longer than they should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you considered turning the audio of these into podcasts? I haven't. I post them on YouTube after, so they're available on YouTube. Sometimes it takes me a few weeks to get to posting them on YouTube because I don't get around to it. But I haven't considered turning the audio into podcasts. That's interesting. If y'all would like for me to do that, just let me know. Shoot me a message, and I'm happy to look into that and figure out how to do that. I have no idea, but okay. Are there resources you wish you had available to help you be more effective?
That time turner that Hermione, so I could have enough time to do all my work and also stay on top of the literature and go to extra trainings and stuff. That would be pretty sweet.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, short of that, I don't know. I mean, I guess infinite funding to go to trainings.
Ooh, okay. Can I get in on this? Like, I want a time turner. I want infinite funding too. Can I like, we need to like work something out here.
You know,
if I find it, I'll let you know how. If you find it, you let me know how.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's on the to-do list along with the time machine and the teleport that I was supposed to have made back in the day.
Absolutely. Ooh, a teleporter would be so nice. It wouldn't have to deal with traffic. That would be great. Hydrate or die.
That's when I get all my podcast listening done, so I don't mind too much.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Hydrate or die. I like it. I like it, Philip. I like your style. Y'all don't forget to drink water.
Yeah, I suppose I'll take my reminder too. My tea has run out. Back up.
There you go. Yep. Make sure you're drinking water. You need to step away from the computer. Need to stretch whatever it is if you've been sitting down for a while. Make sure that you do it. Okay. So do you have a favorite organization system to keep track of notes for therapy sessions? And same kind of question for game sessions.
Notes for therapy sessions, I have folders and subfolders. That wasn't even my system. That's how the outpatient clinic operates. So once I moved into outpatient, I do what they do.
Yeah.
But it's fine. I've got folders for each of my clients and then subfolders for treatment plans and progress notes and that. And then in addition, I just have a separate text file where I keep, kind of my own mental notes, sort of hypotheses for what's going on and quick sketch of what do I probably want to do in the next session. Things that don't actually get their own note, but I want to get them because I will. Gaming, I don't think I ever really found a best organizational system. In the past, I've usually just had like a Word document with stuff for when things started to get more complicated. I found a program. It used to be called Virtual Brain, and then they just changed it to The Brain. But it's more visually organized. So you have different nodes, and you draw connections between them. So it was easier to map out like relationships between PCs and NPCs, and who are the people connected to this location. And then I was briefly running an Ars Magica a few years ago, and so for that, I set up a wiki. I thought that would be a fun way to do it. And that actually worked out pretty well until, again, grown-up life, and the campaign collapsed after 4 sessions, which is a pity because there was so much going on in the background that they had just started to scratch the surface of, and Ars Magica is just an amazing game, and I wish I could have done more.
I love the idea of a wiki for that. I think that's fantastic. So in that wiki, could they like go in and research stuff?
Yeah, so it was
in between. That's awesome.
It was user editable, so all of the players could put in their own notes and they could edit their character pages. But then Obsidian Portal, that was the website I was using. The way they have it set up is you can also have secret notes with restricted access. So I could have the wiki page for this location, and there's all this information that all the players can see. Like, this is what they discovered in the last adventure about this place. Then below that, I've got a couple paragraphs that only I can see. So, I've got the stats for the magic spirit who's there, where like they know the spirit is there, but they don't know all the game stats. But I have it up on the page. Or, there's a secret thing going on here. So I've got my notes right up there on the wiki page with everything else, but only I can see that bit. That was a very nice way to organize.
I love that. That's awesome. Nate can help with the podcast. Okay, all right, cool. I'll check with him. So that's 2 or 3 wishes if we ever find a genie. Good point. Good point by Mark. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Infinite wishes?
Well, that was against the rules, but I actually had a client recently came up with she found a brilliant loophole to that, which is if I can't get infinite wishes, can I wish for more genies?
Ooh.
I don't think they ever forbid that.
I love that.
Yeah, and I want to say this was like an 11 or 12-year-old kid. So, everybody has brilliance in them. You just need to find the way to pull it out.
That's awesome. I love it.
I was real happy with that one.
Yes, absolutely. You mentioned preferring theater of the mind. Do you think you will run your program that way? How would you handle a participant that can't use theater of the mind for whatever reason?
So I briefly alluded to this earlier. The therapy group that I'm going to be doing is going to be using Dungeon World, which is powered by the game. So for those who aren't familiar with that system, it's very much theater of the mind. When combat happens, it's not broken down round by round like it is with D&D or other more traditional games. Sometimes you might just have a couple of die rolls, and that resolves the whole thing. So, the fighter charges in, he rolls or whatever, and it's like, okay, so what happens is the fighter decapitates 3 goblins in one shot. A 4th goblin manages to get an attack in, does a couple points of damage, but the rest of the goblins are all fleeing. One die roll can tell you that. So there isn't the need for the same kind of tactical setup. That said, I'm definitely going to have just sketch paper around because, sometimes the visual cue is nice. Even if we're not going to put minis on a map, it can be helpful just to draw, here's kind of the outline of the cave, here's the tunnel you came in from, here's 2 other tunnels, and here's the lava pit in the middle.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Is there a meditation method you feel is most effective for dealing with workplace anxiety? Ooh, where'd it go? Especially if you only have 10 minutes or less and need to get right back to work.
People who are more deeply into meditation can probably answer than I can. When I've got that middle of the day workplace stress, it's usually just like a minute or 2 of slow diaphragmatic breathing and listening to one of the calmer songs on my playlist.
Yep. I mean,
or if it's a real bad,
there's there even on I think you have an Android, Alex, if I remember correctly, but there's an app that you can get for Android specifically that takes you through just a deep breathing exercise that I found useful as well.
For really bad days, I have a few songs on my list that I like to describe as defiantly joyful. They're exactly the right kind of thing for when just everything's been turning to crap for a couple of days or whatever, but it's like, damn it, this is still going to make me feel genuinely happy for at least 3.5 minutes. For anybody looking for a recommendation, the one that I go to most often is One Last Drink by Enter the Haggis. And if you don't know Enter the Haggis, you'll thank me later.
Okay, I'm writing it down. Haggis, like stomach?
Yes.
Okay, that's how I wrote it down. I was just checking.
Yes, they're a Canadian Celtic rock band. A lot of fun.
Whoa. A Canadian Celtic rock band.
I mean, they live in Canada. I know that the at least one of them is Scottish prior to being there. As far as I can tell, his accent is authentic. But, prior to that, most of my Scottish accent exposure is Groundskeeper Willie.
That's Groundskeeper. Oh, my God. Yeah.
But, yeah, they're an amazing band. They're a ton of fun live. And like I said, the song One Last Drink, it's just, it's so full of joy. And it is literally about a guy who is on his deathbed and says, screw it. I'm going to have one more party before I go out.
Okay. I like it. Okay, is there something outside of your work that you feel you are particularly skilled at? What helps you really break away from the mental weight your patients can put on you? That's a good question, Alex. Thank you.
I mean, the mental weight that I get at work, over the years, I've had plenty of practice at compartmentalizing. So it's pretty rare that I take client issues home with me. It's happened a handful of times. And then usually it's just like, there's not anything specific I need to do, just have an evening to unwind and I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Work stress just in terms of the amount of work I'm carrying, a little bit of a different matter. I mean, things I'm particularly good at on the recreational side, as I mentioned, I think before we went live, I at least used to be good at writing song lyrics. Been out of that for a while. But RPG stuff, I like to think I'm a pretty decent GM, even if everything I'm doing is play by post, which is really a different experience than doing it live or even like online, but in real time. I've tried different forms of creative writing. Right now, I'm writing a board game, so that's where my creative juices are going. I've actually been getting a lot done with it in the last couple of weeks. So now I just have to find the energy and inspiration to come up with like 200 cards worth of unique content. Well, it doesn't all have to be unique. I mean, some of the cards are just going to be variations of nothing happened. Yeah. But I still need to find a lot of different ways to say that to keep it interesting.
Yeah, Alex, who's in the chat right now, he has created a game called Dark Frame, and I remember him having to go through and like figure out what each card does. And how many prints have you done so far, Alex? It's a lot.
Yeah, and then like, you know, I'm putting numbers on these cards, but that 20. Are connected to game rules, but I only have, you know, the vague idea of how the math is going to work out once it actually hits the table. So, you know, I'm hoping that I'm getting things right from the get-go, because I don't want to then have to do 200 cards worth of revisions when it turns out that, like, oh, all these difficulty numbers need to be a couple points higher, except this one that needs to be lower. Whatever. I'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, he actually set it all up in Tabletop Simulator. We did a test play of it, and I think he was going to do some revisions based on that as well. But doing a test play in Tabletop Simulator, like, I know he spent a lot of time setting it up, but
Tabletop Simulator, I'm going to write that one down.
Yeah, so you can get it on Steam, and you can set up your own games to play, and it helps you play through it, and it's pretty cool. So if you're interested in testing it somehow like that, that's a good way
my plan was going to be to get like 2 or 3 copies print on demand, have one for myself, and then, you know, 1 or 2 to just drop off at local game stores with a big sign saying, please play this game and email me with your whatever you think of it.
Yeah. So I just emailed you the link to Tabletop Simulator. If you want to check it out, you're welcome to. And Alex said I would definitely be down to help you with your projects off air as well. So if you need someone to help you set it up in Tabletop Simulator, you have questions about it, please don't ask me because I have no clue.
Okay.
But
well, I suppose if
Alex
you want
is absolutely willing.
My contact information to Alex,
yes,
or vice versa.
I will. Yep, absolutely. Okay. So, so Bite Mark, you were referencing theater of the mind, right? So she said she asked because she personally has very limited visual memory, not quite aphantasia, but similar. Can hold simple images in her mind, so theater of the mind doesn't work for me at all. Always curious how other people handle interacting with people like me.
I mean, nobody's ever come to me and said that this is a thing that's difficult for them. Granted, I realize there's plenty of people where it is something that's difficult and they don't feel comfortable saying so in public.
Yeah.
So I guess thank you for the reminder that I need to be more conscious of that from my end as I'm moving forward. That's definitely helpful. I mean, primarily, I think it would be, like I said earlier, you know, just I could make a sketch of the scene if there's a lot going on. If it gets to the point where, say, you know, if I notice that somebody is still having trouble keeping track of it, I would probably make more of an effort to do something next time. I still wouldn't do the full grid and minis thing because, it's, like I said, especially for Dungeon World, it just doesn't really operate that way. But even just something as far as like, okay, so next week I'm going to bring in some Legos, or, you know, I've got a set of poker chips. I'll bring that in and just say, you know, well, you guys are the black chips, and, you know, put a letter on it with your character's initial, and the orcs are the green chips. Whatever works. But certainly I would find ways to increase the visual cues without it becoming overly cumbersome.
Yeah.
Because the other thing is I'm going to be running 90-minute sessions, of which probably only about 60 to 70 minutes is going to be game time. I don't want to be devoting a lot of that to setting up the battle scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex sent a website for getting cards printed in small batches, so I'll send that to you as well.
Sure, thanks.
So, in case any of this is useful to you, I mean...
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So what have been your biggest challenges as you develop this plan for the RPG sessions?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there was the grant that got denied. That's something of a challenge. But my employer has already graciously agreed to foot the bill if I didn't get the grant. That said, I have also calculated that since we are still going to be billing insurance for the group therapy, they will recover their money and then some, assuming we actually get enough participants and consistent attendance.
Right.
Which is a big if, but we'll see what happens. So at this point, I'd say the biggest challenge has been just finding the time to do all. Because this is something that I've taken on myself separately from all the duties that the agency has given me, it's something that I only do in my own time, spend work time on this, because work time is when I need to be typing all my evaluations and seeing clients and doing other admin work that they need me to do. So that's the biggest thing. I feel like at this point, I have my paperwork probably about 80% ready to go for the ethics review, which has to happen before I can start anything else. But the rest of that 20% it's a lot of polishing up. It's a lot of just really making sure everything looks just right for what they're going to want to see. Also making sure that it looks just right for what all the people above me in the agency are going to want to see before they tell me that it's okay to send it out for the ethics review. Excuse me. And then after that, probably scheduling is going to be the most difficult part.
Yeah.
Because I've got to find time that works for all these kids and also that works for me because, I have my own family. I don't like working.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, you need the time turner.
Again, yeah. I don't know. Maybe if I can contact J.K. Rowling.
Maybe she got her inspiration somehow rooted in reality. I don't know.
I don't know. Rowling, if you're watching this, we need to talk.
Yes,
I'm sorry,
absolutely.
Ms. Rowling. I really should be more polite.
Okay, so your background includes working with adolescents with inappropriate sexual behaviors and with victims of maltreatment. You also mentioned wanting to work with kids in the foster system. So how rampant is maltreatment in the foster system today? And are there any particular groups of kids that are at highest risk?
All right. So this is the one I mentioned earlier that I had to do a little homework to prepare for it. So what I read up was that at least reported maltreatment is actually a lot less common in the foster system than I expected that it would be. Granted, this is also possibly an artifact. Things are reported.
Yeah.
So I looked at most recent data for the United States as a whole and also for Pennsylvania specifically, since that's where I practice. And the numbers were pretty consistent between the two of them, which is that for most recent years, so 2018 for Pennsylvania and then 2017 federal data, only about 0.3% of substantiated reports of abuse were committed by a foster parent. The limitation with that is that that's only the foster parent. That does not include abuse that might be committed by other children in the foster home,
right,
or other, just other people in the foster home who all get lumped into an other category, which again makes up a fairly small percentage. I mean, the data have been clear that the vast majority of substantiated reports of maltreatment are committed by one or both parents or step parents. But yeah, within foster care, it's really very little. One thing that did surprise me with federal data was the report I looked at had a state-by-state breakdown. Most states were pretty consistent, between 0.3 and 0.5%. But then Alaska, Kansas, and Minnesota were all a little bit over 1%, which compared to the other states is really big. I have no idea why those states were so high. If any of the viewers live in any of those states, feel free to throw out some hypotheses. And if anybody wants, I did actually write down specific links for where I got all this data, so I can pass that out, because I try to be a stickler for citing sources, and I certainly want to try to live up to my own standards.
Yep, Bitemark said she would love to have that too, so if you could send that to me, I'll definitely.
Yeah, when we're done, I can send you one email with all the links in it.
Perfect.
Okay. And then, I forgot already if you said it when you asked the question a few minutes ago, but you did mention in the email just looking at different risk factors that might increase the risk of abuse and maltreatment.
Yep.
So risk factors in general really are just a lot of family stressors. So social isolation, domestic violence within the family, parents being unable to understand or respond to their children's needs, and in many cases, parents having their own unmet needs, such as trauma history, drug and alcohol abuse, a whole host of other things.
Mm-hmm.
What I found that was specific to foster care, I didn't find a lot, but what I did see mentioned an increased risk when foster parents are younger, and especially if it's only one caregiver, and also in homes where kids are sharing rooms. I'm assuming that is more where it's, abuse by another child in the home rather than by the caregiver.
Yeah.
And then one other thing that came out of that article, they mentioned that kinship homes are less likely to have abuse than foster homes where there's no relationship to the biological family.
And a kinship home, that's where they're not living with their direct parents or guardians. They're living with someone else related to them, or is that...
Right. So either a different family member, or sometimes it'll even be like a neighbor, family friend. But legally, they'll be classified as a kinship home because they are closely connected to the family. So it's still considered foster care in most ways, but it's a different relationship. And certainly for the kids, that does matter. And I don't remember how much it matters legally within the system. I know usually they try to start by placing kids in some sort of a kinship home before they go to an unrelated foster home. More often than not, it's good for the kids.
Yeah.
Not always. There are those families too.
Sure. Yeah, there's exceptions to every rule.
Yep.
So how do you envision your RPG setup will more directly address trauma in kids? So a lot of kids go into the foster system and either as a result of a trauma or they are traumatized as a result of being put into the foster system. So how do you see this kind of addressing that trauma in kids?
So I hadn't thought too far into that part of it specifically. Broadly speaking, one of the things I like most about RPGs as a therapeutic tool is that inherently they get you to be taking different perspectives and considering different options and experiencing failure in a way that is not immediately threatening. Sometimes it might be threatening for the character, but you still have that layer of removal. But no, it's also, well, I rolled badly on this thing I tried, but we're still okay. We just, maybe we alerted the guards, but we can work with that.
Right.
And I mean, a lot of that is relevant to trauma. As I'm just trying to think through this now, you've got kids in a situation where they have learned some specific lessons that are really not the things that we want them to be learning, but it's what life experience has taught them. And a lot of these kids don't have a lot of other experiences, or when they finally do get into some other experiences, everything is filtered through what came before, so they're not seeing it the same way. They're not as receptive to what they could be learning by just well, we took you out of the worst neighborhood in Philadelphia and we put you into a pretty decent neighborhood where like, you could actually go to school without getting into fights every day and nobody's firing guns in your street. But the kids aren't living like that. They're still stuck in that traumatized mode because it's so ingrained in them. And so RPGs are a different way to get at that idea of considering different possibilities and considering different ways to think about the situation you're in. So I could say, Johnny, the kid sitting at the table across from me, okay, you're always looking for a fight because, this is what you grew up with and it's how you had to survive. But the cleric that you are playing, he's not necessarily looking for a fight. Mm-hmm. It says right there on the character sheet, he's going to get bonus XP anytime, he can bring light into somebody's life. So how are you going to earn that bonus XP? Yeah. That's one of the other things I love about Dungeon World and why I chose that system specifically is that, part of it is you get bonus XP for specific goals. They have it labeled as alignment because they're trying to play off of the old D&D tropes.
Yeah.
I changed the phrasing a little bit. So it's just, the 3 personality traits on this list. And when you do this thing in a session, you're going to get bonus points for that. Also, getting bonus XP on a failed roll, I think, is a great therapy for. So we got to learn from our mistakes. So your character is learning from mistakes. Why don't you tell me how that character is learning? That's getting a little bit off topic. The other thing that I was planning to do when I moved social skills to more trauma focused with the RPG group is in the distant past, like people have posted things on RPGnet specifically saying, RPGs helped me to recover after this trauma that I went through. So I'm hoping to just talk to a lot of people there and maybe elsewhere privately, explicitly have had that experience, try to get their, as much as they can introspect about it. What do they think helped them about RPGs? And then see if I can pull out some patterns and really emphasize those bits of it.
Yeah.
But I haven't gotten to that part of the research yet.
Have you had any?
Now, sorry. I just want to comment. I can do one or two more questions, but I think I'm going to need to wrap up after that.
No worries. Have you had any instances where RPGs have helped you with issues in your life?
Dealing with, big problem kind of thing. They've definitely helped by being the focus of my social life. I don't know that I would say I probably was socially awkward back in the day. I was certainly socially comfortable to an extent. Mm-hmm. So, I got to college. I met a new people. Many of them were already into RPGs also, which, there's probably personality factors there, which are why we hit it off to begin with. But then that made it very easy to just keep a social group going. There's the much lamented difficulty of developing a new social group as an adult. Well, that was my old RPG group, to the extent that that I still have friends who live in my area that aren't college friends. They're my old gamer friends that when we can still see each other once in a blue moon. I have tried using RPG to explore maybe not my own problems, but things that I'm seeing a lot at work. So creating characters where I know they've got this specific thing in their background, they've got this or that personality trait maybe, and just trying to use the game as an interesting way to explore that and try to get into that mind frame, which has worked a little bit, except that, it's mostly play-by-post gaming, and 90% of those games collapse within the space of what would probably be 1 or 2 sessions of tabletop.
Right.
So I don't get to explore as much as I want to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of a drawback. People just drop off. So I'll ask you one more question. We can wrap up after that. So chat, if you have any other questions for our guests, just pop them in there and we'll address what we can. But if you could, ideal world, change one thing about the mental health field or people's views of mental health professionals and educators, what would it be?
Definitely going back to what I was saying earlier about, therapy is only for crazy people, or, that people who are in therapy are damaged. These very pejorative ways to look at it and I admit, when I started out, high school, college, even the early days of grad school, I kind of had that mind frame myself. At the superficial level of abnormal psych, that's a lot of it. We're talking about what's wrong with people, different patterns of what's wrong. But then when you really start working with people and you actually get into understanding what's going on, as I commented before, 90% of cases, what this person is doing makes complete sense within the context of this person's life.
Mm-hmm.
They might not be making good decisions, but they are making the decisions that have gotten them to where they are now, and they're still alive. So that's what they're going to go with. Really, kind of the biggest thing that changed my way of thinking about it during grad school was at one of my practicum sites. They were working on implementing a trauma-informed treatment model, which really all revolves around this. I mean, there's a lot there, but there's one statement that really sums it up. And you see this floating around when if you're looking at mental health, social media stuff. It's this idea of, it's not about what's wrong with you, it's about what happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
Once I got that into my head, I mean, that changed everything for me. I want that to change everything for everybody else.
Yep, absolutely. No, I love that. It's not about what's wrong with you. It's about what happened to you. I think that's perfect. I like that.
Yeah. And even for cases where, last comment, building on that, you even, people might argue about, what about like ADHD or bipolar, where, this is primarily a neurological thing. It's not, they didn't get traumatized into having ADHD. Yes, that's true. But then look at what happens to a kid who has ADHD. Yeah. Physically speaking, and of course, with some exceptions, kids are not going to do school, are going to get into trouble. The people around them are going to be frustrated with them more often and are probably going to be a little more punitive with them, because you just get so fed up with a kid who won't sit still and who you have to remind them 20 times to do every single thing. And so that is going to affect where that person goes in life.
Yep.
That's why we see so many kids they're diagnosed with ADHD, but they've also got a lot of anger. Anger is not part of that diagnosis, so what's it doing there? Well, they're angry because everybody's treating them like crap for something that they're really having a hard time controlling.
Yeah.
Or the flip side of it, you have ADHD. Take your pills. It's not helping. Take more pills. Well, maybe there's something else here besides just taking pills, but everyone's ignoring that because of ADHD. You need medication.
Right.
I'm not saying don't take meds. Medication for ADHD, when it is diagnosed correctly and when it is prescribed correctly, is a wonderful thing. I have seen it make huge differences in people's lives in a primarily way. But that's not every single case.
Yeah.
And even when it does help, people will talk, they'll only focus on medication and ignore.
Yeah.
So, okay, I think I'm done with my soapbox now.
No. You stay on that soapbox as long as you need to.
Yeah, that's what Twitter's for.
No, well, okay, that is true. Well, I appreciate you being here. Bite Mark said thank you so much for being here. I learned a lot and got some new music to listen to. So there you go.
All right.
And
enjoy.
I will post this to YouTube. I'll tag you whenever I do. And if you send me the sources that you mentioned, I'll make sure that they get posted with the description of this too. It'll be available on Twitch as soon as I'm done with the broadcast. It'll be available, and I'll change the description once I'm done tonight as well.
Yeah, so I can email that to you as soon as we're done before I go to bed.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Alex says, thanks for taking the time. Greatly appreciated. You guys, I will be right back. Give me a second to disconnect with our guest here, and then I will be right back. We'll play a game. I'm not sure what yet.
I will just say one last thing, since it seems like there were some questions that we didn't have time for. Mm-hmm. If anybody does have anything they want to ask me directly, you're welcome to contact me online. I'm at Dr. Mindermast on Twitter and on RPGnet and on RPOL if anybody's using that site. I'm open to private messages from people I don't know. Worst case scenario, I won't respond to you if you're bothering me that much. But I'm sure everybody here is going to be cool, and you are welcome to hit me up for questions.
Yep, I just posted the link to his Twitter, and y'all feel free, if you have more questions, to reach out directly. And just, we appreciate you being here. Absolutely. These are always really
informative. Thanks very much for the invitation. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Okay. First interview down. Let's where I can go from here.
There you go. Okay, chat. Give me just a second. I will be right back.
All right. Good night, everybody.